Well, hi, you guys. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Homeschool Freedom Podcast. We are your hosts. I am Madelyn Michels, joined by Emily Fort, and we have a lot of different things to talk about today, namely what happened in the most recent elections. So we're not just going to doom scroll you here. We're going to talk about what happened. We're going to talk about the losses, what happened in all these different states, but we're also going to talk about how did we get here in the first place? Why do homeschoolers keep losing all the time? And what do we do to make sure this doesn't happen anymore? What do we do? How do we pivot? How do we change so that every single election night isn't spent the same way, looking at all these people that are winning that hate us, hate homeschool freedom, want nothing good for our families. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And again, a big emphasis on what can we do differently going forward. So we're going to talk about first what happened in Virginia. And if you've been following kind of what's been going on there, that state was already really leaning blue pretty hard. And then with these most recent elections, the Democrats got a super majority. So it was already really bad. Homeschooling was already really under attack in that state. And we know now that with these election results, it's just going to continue worse and worse. So, Emily, I was hoping you can kind of explain what happened this last election cycle in Virginia, and also the bills that were being proposed there to restrict homeschooling just this year.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to kind of break some of this down. I think in Virginia last year, I guess this year's technically, but I think of it as last session because the session's over. There was a bill filed, SB 1031, and it was defeated at great effort. As usual, these bills usually take an enormous amount of grassroots effort and time. But the thing I'm wanting to draw attention to today is the fact that the assembly in Virginia was split 51 Democrats to 49 Republicans. And so the bill was defeated, and we'll get into what the bill said in a little bit here. But essentially what happened is instead of having 51, a very, very narrow majority, the Democrats in Virginia now have 64 out of 100 seats, which basically means any legislation they want to run through is going to be very, very difficult to stop. And so, and this, why did this happen is like, well, a couple of things. We have millions and millions of government workers furloughed in Northern Virginia and around the DC area, and maybe not millions and millions, but very, very many hundreds of thousands and their spouses. And there are vendors and contractors who work for those entities that are now furloughed. It's like the entire economy of the northern half of Virginia, and I lived in Virginia for 3 years, is tied up in what's going on in DC. So first of all, that didn't help. And then secondly, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. Polling is really down on the Republican, what's happening in DC on the Republican leadership. And that dissatisfaction with what's happening in DC trickles down into state elections. And I don't want to say anything terrible about Miss Sears, Winsome Sears, but I would say she was not a strong candidate. She was not really appealing to the base of the Republican Party. She was not necessarily exciting. She wasn't motivating every single voter to get out there and a bunch of new voters to get out there. It seems to be the Republican Party, especially in Virginia. I've been involved in legislative politics in Virginia going back to 2019, when the state went blue the first time since the 90s. And again, it was an instance of so many politicians and legislators put forward for office in Virginia were so milquetoast. They're so uninspiring and not motivating to the base that a lot of people just stay home because they don't really feel like it's their candidate. And I'm not going to say that was the case with Winsome Sears, but I will say Virginia has been trending that way since 19, and they flipped it back a little bit by getting Youngkin in, but they did not. The Republican establishment in Virginia did not learn the lesson from what happened in 19. And, the spanking they got from Governor Northam in 20, it's like this has been a trend, and it's happening in other states. And that's why it matters for this podcast is how do we protect homeschooling when maybe the state leadership of the parties in our state are not pulling as hard for our freedom and our rights as we want them to? It's like, what's a homeschooler in Virginia or New Jersey or any of these other places that had a bad night on Tuesday? What are they supposed to do when their own party leadership isn't doing a good job of moving their topics forward? How can we stop this? And on top of it, we've got now a situation in Virginia that's going to be bad. Like, I mean, what's coming in the spring in Virginia, the writing is on the wall here. And, it kind of ties back to what you were saying about the bill this spring. The Homeschool Freedom Coalition.
Can I, and it's okay. Now, I don't mean to interrupt you, Emily, but I wanted to make the point there that we should really focus on this. The Republican Party should learn a lesson from this, that you can't just keep putting forward the most boring, uninspiring, non-dedicated, terrible candidates. And again, they were not all that in Virginia. I know that there were a bunch of people that should have won and didn't win. But I think that's a lesson that needs to be like ingrained in our heads, is the Republicans in our state, there's a huge disconnect between them and between us. What are the problems that are affecting homeschoolers? What are the problems that are affecting parents and people with small kids and things like that? There's a total disconnect. And you can even see that in their talking points, what's on their website. It's like, I don't care about any. Those things don't affect my grocery bill. Those things don't affect, the crazy guy that's trying to make homeschooling illegal in this state, or, remove religious exemptions, for all kinds of things. So I think,
if you're an older homeschool mom who's got teenage children, maybe, again, I'm on the older end of homeschoolers here. And I would say, as somebody who grew up in that era of the 90s, where we're all raising my brothers and every boy I knew growing up in the homeschool groups and at our church, they're all growing up to, live out this homeschool American dream, find a nice homeschool girl, get married, ideally, you're going to be in the trades, because we're not falling for that college trap, all this stuff that was all just part of the culture that I grew up in. Well, now seems so out of reach for our children. So the guys I grew up with, many of them were able to do that. They married, before they were 25. If, they own a small business, they are in the trades, they're doing well, but their 15, 16, 17-year-old sons are being completely ignored. and their daughters are also in the same sort of, everybody I know, there's just a societal decay at work that I don't think is being acknowledged well by the Republican Party, as young people are not at all feeling like they're being listened to. They're not feeling like anyone's voting. None of the Republicans are voting for their future. And they're pretty sure the Democrats are voting for literally anyone else's future. And we're not a partisan group. Like, this is a political commentary, is young people think the Democrats are trying to give their future away to literally anyone but them. And they think the Republican Party is still over here totally out to lunch, not paying any attention to the fact that they're getting nothing out of the Republican Party. What are they getting for voting for these candidates the Republican Party is putting forward in some of these states? What's the payoff? Insanely high taxes, insanely high cost of living, insanely high housing. We're all just supposed to look the other way and pretend this isn't happening to those young people. Well, I think the elections in Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, because there were some pretty key races in those states the other night, they're a wake-up call that that's not going to work anymore. And one other, I really want to talk about this. I'm so glad we're doing this podcast today. One other thing is, I'm pretty plugged in. I would say I'm very plugged in to what's happening politically. And I watched with interest, and our organization got involved a little bit in Wisconsin this summer with the Supreme Court race there over Susan Crawford. And again, we saw that the Republican Party did not harness the Patriot moms. They did not harness the Maha mommies, which, I mean, I think that's a silly term, but I am one. It's like this, we got here because the Republican Party, by and large, is still doing what they've always done. They're going, well, these are the tricks of the trade. These are the things we've done for 40 years, 50 years. These are how we win, this is how we win elections. This is how we control things. And the Democrats, meanwhile, they're being pulled, in a different direction, much further left by, the new ranks in their party. The AOCs are pulling away from parental freedom. They're pulling away from homeschooling. They're pulling towards government control of every part of our lives. And so what's happening is in the middle, you have this whole generation of moms that have woken up and it's sad they took the term woke, but they've woken up to the government's not protecting my kids. And so what you have is the Republican establishment is doing what they've always done, and they think that's their winning playbook because it used to work. Okay, it used to work. Well, and the Democrats, meanwhile, are moving in a totally different direction and using much more effective tactics than they used to use. And left behind are the Maha mamas, the homeschool parents, the young people who care a great deal about the financial opportunity and future and stability of this country. And I think what we need to learn from what happened in Virginia is we need to stop waiting on one of these parties to save us, because they're not coming. There's no one coming. We have to do this ourselves. And I find that exciting, because when you are sending other people to the Capitol to represent you, when you're sending in, essentially lobbyists to represent you, and the Republican Party is putting forward representatives as candidates, you're always just having to choke down the fact that they're not in total agreement with your values and your worldview. When we do this ourselves, it is 100% our values, and we can do things much more effectively because it's 100% our way, instead of, we want 100%, but immediately we have to moderate our expectations to get only 60%. And then by the time the Republican Party gets it actually passed, and gets a Republican in office to do this for us, we're at like 10% of what we wanted is actually happening. But if we advocate for ourselves, then, and not wait on them to do it for us, and not, filter our requests through the ranks of the party, I think we can be much more effective.
Well, and I think that point in and of itself is a really big one, that a lot of people have been left out of the election cycle. A lot of people have been ignored, and we're just done doing that. I personally am sick and tired of seeing homeschoolers lose. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it every single election night, over and over and over and over. You watch this happen in different states and you go, oh crap. Oh, what's going to happen now? Oh, what bills are going to be filed? It's like, we're done with that. And I think to your point, Emily, about, we can't wait for the Republican Party. We also can't wait for all of homeschoolers to make the shift either, about what needs to happen here. It's like, we can't wait till everybody says, okay, yeah, now it's time. It's like, we have to be more aggressive. We have to be more pressure than the other side is. And so what we've talked about this before, that politics is a pressure game. They don't care. They don't listen. They're not interested in what we need unless we're the ones who are louder than the other side. And that's something that Democrats have always been really good at doing, is getting their people to be vocal, to be involved, to be intense. And we have to learn as homeschoolers how to switch that, where we don't just show up at the Capitol one day a year, but all the time. Politicians in your state capital and my state capital know that if I don't vote to protect homeschooling, or if I go and propose a bill to restrict homeschooling in some way, homeschoolers are going to hold me accountable big time, and I'm not going to be able to get away from it. And I think that's just a very, very important shift, that we cannot just be so polite. And we can't just hope that if we educate everybody enough, they'll come to see things our way. Like, no, they won't. No, they won't. Because if they would have, it would have been done by now. And it hasn't. There are millions of homeschoolers. Everybody knows somebody who has homeschooled. Everybody has got somebody in their church that homeschools.
Half of them are homeschooling. Half the legislators' kids are in private school or homeschooling already.
It's like, they know the talking points are out there. The statistics have been out there since the 90s. Everybody knows this now. And that education model hasn't worked, of just tell them that we're normal and they'll understand. So I think that's the big thing. And like you said, I'm excited for it, that there are so many people that are like, we're done. We're out of this game where we wait for somebody to tell us, what to do. We're going to take this back ourselves. We're going to get louder. Right. We're going to get more mobilized. We're going to get more involved in our local political races and things like that. And I just want to kind of mention here that we have started a series on this very topic, on how politics works. So if you're somebody that's watching this going, okay, I live in New Jersey, I saw what happened to my state. Now what do I do? What can I do? I'm a mom. I don't have 30 hours a week to put towards this. This series that we are producing is specifically for you. Like, here's how you can get involved in your local race. This is what actually works. These are the tactics that work. And here's why. And here's how you can build something in your state. And I think that is the future of the homeschooling movement.
Yeah. Oh no, I totally agree. And I'm so stoked for it because, we saw in Wisconsin, like I mentioned earlier, and we saw again this week in Virginia, that leaving behind the Maha mommies is a recipe for losing. And I'll just say, I have always, for those who maybe not have seen much of our content or haven't listened to our other podcasts, I worked for a homeschool curriculum company for nearly 10 years, a few months shy of it. And Madelyn worked for the same company for several years. And I always said, and I talked to tens of thousands of families and helped them start homeschooling over the phone. And I absolutely loved it. And then I went to homeschool conventions all over the country, talked to them in person, taught workshops, the whole 9 yards. And one thing I always said was homeschooling is a bit of a gateway drug, right? Homeschooling is when you get in here and you start being around a different crowd of people who have rejected, decades of propaganda. Okay, let's just be really honest about it, is the school system controls what everyone thinks about education starting when they're 5 years old. And so if you've started homeschooling, you've rejected decades of propaganda. And I mean, all the little kids' books about going to school and the TV shows for kids, Franklin's first day of school. It's like there's decades of propaganda that a parent is rejecting if they're going to homeschool. Well, the same thing, it's a gateway drug, because once you're in here and you've taken the leap of homeschooling, it's like, well, I should also examine what I believe about, the medical treatments they want my child to have. I should also examine my beliefs about, the rat race. And do I get my greatest sense of fulfillment out of, making some boss in a cubicle happy? Or do I get my greatest sense of fulfillment, being home with my family if I'm able, or, or finding some side gig at home, or, if I could spend all day with my kids, would I really be miserable? Or is that the propaganda that props up the school system? Right. And if I am miserable, like, should I deal with that? Or should I just ignore it and shove them on the bus and hope that it gets better? Like, I think I probably have a better chance of fixing that with like not wanting to be around my kids all day if I took the time to build better relationship and more connection and like resolve those issues, get some therapy, like whatever it takes, right? Like, I just want to have a good relation with my kids. There's so much work. Why would I not be able to stand being around them? Like, I got to fix that, not just they've normalized that, which is terrifying. But all that to say is, when you think of homeschooling as a gateway drug, and keep in mind, any one of those topics can be a gateway drug that introduces people to homeschooling. You might come into homeschooling because you were woken up during COVID and that whole mess, and it really opened your eyes. Or maybe you came into homeschooling after, you came in the really healthy food movement. Like, I can't feed my kids this industrial food anymore, and so it's really hard to control what they're eating, so we're just going to homeschool. I mean, I know several families like that. So what I'm trying to get to the point here is that there are a lot of people that are in this group now, under 30, young moms, very passionate and much more politically active, much more engaged. And so literally 2 years ago, we were saying things, not just Madelyn and I, but the whole board of HFC and everybody, kind of involved in getting this off the ground. We're saying it is time for a turn. We need to, and if you've been around me personally or Madelyn in the last 2 years, you'd have heard us both saying it's time to round the bend. We need to round the corner. We need to get around the corner. We need to leave behind the old ideas about how to be effective in politics, we have a huge group now of people of maha mommies and
parents
medical
and
freedom.
grandparents and
Yes, I mean grandparents who are seeing all the headlines. I think there are a lot of people that are ready for something different. They're ready to round the bend. They're ready to do things in a different political way, because we're losing when we let the Republican Party or any other organization speak for us. And I feel like that's what the Homeschool Freedom Coalition is here to do, is to help people use new tactics and do new things. And Madelyn, I know that you and I, we've talked about this, like what's being done on the ground in these states and what could be done. And I think you could probably bring some light here.
Yeah, I think some people are doing these things. Some candidates, some parties, some homeschool groups are doing these things. But by and large, we've seen the lack of, I would just put it as they're not doing all the things that can be done in these races. Homeschoolers are sitting here and they're not getting texts about their local race. They're not getting emails about their local race. They're not getting comparisons of candidates. Like, well, okay, they're both Republicans. They both say they're for freedom. How do I know who to vote for?
Right.
That's a question that constantly comes up is, how do I know who to vote for? And we will never tell you who to vote for.
Right.
But you need to be able to see a comparison of candidates. This is what they say. This is what they've pledged that they're going to vote on. Or if it's the incumbent, this is what they have voted on. There should be Facebook ads in all of these swing districts so that all the people there can be mobilized,
Yes.
can know what's going on. There's 100 different things that you can do to rally people so they know what's happening. They know who to tell their friend at church or their sister to avoid, whatever that looks like. That's what we are not seeing in all of these states. We're seeing some things here. Maybe you got 2 or 3 emails in Pennsylvania over the last 6 months about the races, but that doesn't help, when you're coming to vote for your state rep or your state senator or your assemblyman, whatever it is. It's like, those are the things. These are the new tactics that we're talking about. These are some of the things. If I get a text on my phone and it says X candidate in the last, session voted against parental rights, they voted against this, they voted against homeschooling. It's like, oh, well, now I know what to do. Now I know where to go with this.
Right.
But those are some of the things that need to be employed, that we are going to employ here at the Homeschool Freedom Coalition. Like, this is that bend we're talking about, where you have to mobilize more people. You have to give them good candidates, which, we can't do that in every single state ourselves. But when you train up a whole generation to know exactly what to look for, those are the people that are going to do it. Those are the people that are going to find the local candidate and get them running. So I think there's 100 different ways.
If you don't mind, I want to add one thing to that.
Yeah.
That is how politics is effectively done. Okay. So, and we see that on the opposite side of the political spectrum. That is exactly what the teachers unions do. They mobilize their base. They have their lists of teachers union, members, and the spouses of their teachers union members, and their vendors and all the people that make money off the teachers union system continuing. They mobilize them all of these ways in elections. And so when we say at the Homeschool Freedom Coalition that we want to make homeschoolers an effective political force, that's exactly what we're talking about right there. Everything Madelyn just said, that's what we want to do. That's what we are doing, because the other side, not just in education, but think of any social topic you care about. That's exactly what they've done. They found every single voter who cares about this little pet topic of their, whatever it is, good or bad. They have mobilized them. They are social media ads. They're, doing candidate surveys. They're putting forward candidates. They are, sending out emails. They're alerting voters. They're doing the whole enchilada, right?
And they're so much more aggressive than we are.
And so we are doing that for homeschooling. That is what we are. We are here to say, listen, if you need help starting homeschooling, feel free to message. We're happy to help if we can, or we'll find you someone who can help you in your state. Hopefully, we'll redirect you to a good resource. There are already existing organizations in every state, wonderful people, wonderful I mean, with the exception of Texas, but I've talked about that plenty, like wonderful organizations to help people start homeschooling, find community, pick a curriculum, all of that. We exist to make homeschoolers exactly the aggressive political fighting force that Madelyn just described. And if you think of this from the perspective of a legislator, they are sitting there in their offices and they're not hearing from homeschoolers as an effective, mobilized voting bloc in their districts. They see homeschoolers come on Capitol Day. They know, oh, this is the day I have to take pictures with homeschoolers. And, this is the day I have to put on a big, show for homeschooling. But they don't fear us because we go home and we're all individually, motivated to varying levels, and we get involved to varying levels. But they don't sit there in their office 6 weeks later and go, gosh, if I vote the wrong way on this bill, the homeschoolers are just going to cream me at election time. They don't think that ever in any state, anywhere. Never. It has never occurred to them. I promise you. They sit there and they go, gosh, like, how much heat am I going to get from the teachers union? How much heat am I going to get, from the NEA lobbyists? How much heat am I going to get from all, how many voters in my district work for the school system and would like this bill? How many people in my district are homeschoolers? Well, the people in their district that work for government education, they're doing everything Madelyn just said. And homeschoolers are not yet. And that is why the Homeschool Freedom Coalition exists. We're going to do all of it. And we're going to do it. And it's going to be fun. Because if you're a mom under the age of 30, under the age of 40, I'm under the age of 40, like, we want to win. And we're going to win. We have the young people. We have the collapse of the education system happening all around us. We have the proof is in the pudding, Right. We are winning this, but we need to use these new tactics. We need to round the bend. We need to start being more aggressive in politics. We need to be effective, not just, it's like I said, I made a post on our Facebook page the other day. I had our gal put it up there. It's like, our parents, literally, my parents, had to prove that homeschooling worked. We have to prove that we can keep it free. That's our job. That's why we're here. And we want you to join us. We want every person listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube or wherever you're seeing it, we want you to join us and become part of this movement to make homeschooling a politically feared and respected entity, so that we are not begging for scraps. We are not, and I was talking on Tuesday with my husband, and I said, I'm just bracing myself for the posts I'm going to see in all my mom groups on Facebook tomorrow of all the moms going, where can I flee to? Where can I run? Right. Where can I move? I'm leaving New Jersey. I'm leaving New York State. Finally, I'm leaving Virginia. I have to get away. And it's like, we have to stand and fight. I'm not saying you have to stay in your state. I don't know the circumstances of everybody's life. I'm just saying, homeschoolers, pretty soon there's nowhere to flee. We have to stand and fight for homeschooling. We have to make it, there has to be a cost to them trying to step on us. So even if we can't beat them always, we have to make them politically pay for trying to destroy parental rights. We have to be more aggressive in doing that. And so, I know we're kind of like, I've said this in probably every video we've ever made, but it's like, we have to round the bend. We have to get more aggressive. We have to get more politically active and with new tactics. And we have to do everything you just said. We need election campaign. Because again, what's going to happen in Virginia? We
already can see what's going to happen in Virginia.
And why did we lose in Virginia? It's like, well, there's a lot of factors. I'm not going to blame any organizations for not doing, everything, because they can't help the furlough and they can't help the national weakness in the Republican Party right now. But we can do a lot more than we did. Okay. And what are we going to do when they come with a bill and now with a 64 to 100 instead of 51, majority in Virginia? What are we going to do? It's like, oh no, we're all going to donate to homeschool organizations because we're under attack. We should have been laying out money in this election cycle to prevent some of this, because now we're years away from a political solution. in Virginia. We're years away from the next election where we can flip this around. And that's years of parental rights crushed. That's years of legislation becoming, getting legal, getting precedence, right? Oh, it's passed in Virginia. It's been there in the books for a couple of years already. Oh, well, then that's like a cancer that spreads. They use that as an excuse to pass it in other states. Like, we have got to get ahead of this and be involved in these primaries and be involved in organizing homeschoolers. And yeah, that's what the Homeschool Freedom Coalition is about.
Well, I think the most exciting part of all of this is that there are so many people who are in the same camp. There are so many people who already agree. There are so many mothers, parents, like you've said before, grandparents who have recognized this. They've been waiting for somebody to take this farther, to change this. And I think that's where we have a real shot. Like you said, Emily, that these people have been left out of the voting block. They're not who things are pandered to. They're just kind of like, oh, you're just a mom. But we have seen time and time again that when you mobilize parents who are motivated by the most pure thing they can be motivated by, the love of their children.
Yes.
It's like those people are a fighting force. They just have been waiting to be mobilized. They've been waiting to be called up. But I don't know anybody on any cause that cares so much as parents do about their child's freedom. You can care about a lot of different things, and you might have your pet topic or this thing that you care about, but there's just nothing that rallies people more than this affects my child. Like, I'll do whatever I have to do. And so that's the most exciting thing, is that this is not a camp of 12 people. You've got people all across the country who've been waiting to make this change. So if you're watching, if you're like that, if you're one of us, if you've been waiting for this kind of a change and this kind of, frankly, aggression,
let's go.
Join us. Share the podcast, join our organization, sign up for email alerts. We have so much stuff coming at you in different states, in different races, people that need to be contacted. So just join us. We have a lot of this coming, and we have to fight back. This is the time to do it.